Life is complex.
So is our mental health. It cannot be understood by diagnosis alone.
Our philosophy is treat the person, not the mental illness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Humanizing Mental Health. I'm Trent Akers.
And I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
Yeah. So, Jeremy, I'm curious. Whenever you start with a new client, how often do you find them using technical language to really describe their presenting issue?
Yeah, actually, that happens actually, I would say, a fair bit. Tell me what you mean when you say technical language.
So, okay. Sorry. When I say technical language, I should really reframe that and say diagnostic language.
Yeah, for sure. Like someone coming in because they're saying, I want to work on my anxiety, or I want to work on my depression, or I have whatever that is.
Yeah, and you know, like, and that's really interesting because how we describe certain things colloquially is very different from when we describe it diagnostically. And for those of listeners that have been with our podcast for a while, they'll know that when Jeremy was working at Alberta Health Services, part of your job was actually to provide people with a provisional diagnosis.
Yeah, so we should really speak to that a little bit. Like generally speaking, only in certain areas, in particular, social workers with certain licensing actually provide a formal diagnosis, for sure.
Yeah.
And you're correct. Like I became very familiar with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual because we were trained on it. And because we were required to use it with every single person that came into our care, with the understanding that it was for our treatment purposes. So it was, like you say, a provisional diagnosis, not exactly the same as receiving this from a doctor or psychiatrist or psychologist.
Yeah, so basically, to break that down a little bit further, we would almost call that like a working theory of what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. And often then my process, my workup then would be handed off to a doctor or handed off to a psychiatrist, and they would then do the more formal full diagnosis as needed. Like lots of times that's not necessarily needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And right there, I think that is the whole ethos behind our podcast, really, is the diagnosis really needed? That's why we say treat for those of you that have obviously listened to the intro, if you're listening to this right now, we treat the person, not the mental illness. But I think with that being said, it's really important to highlight, what is in the diagnosis and why that's important, because sometimes we'll use this very clinical language but not really understand the full depth to it. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the aspects that becomes very useful in this process is a little bit of understanding the history of mental health, that through, like, even in our lifetime, my lifetime. When were you born again?
1987. I just had a birthday
Oh, yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
couple days ago.
10 years younger than me. So certainly within both of our lifetimes, but within since about the 1970s, and then as it evolved beyond, the idea of mental illness is actually very different than it is now.
Absolutely. And I know, like, as you and I were talking off mic, that it's really like, I'm granted this gets over you or is quite used now, but there's a grand spectrum between mental health and mentally ill. And I think that, well, like you had said, that people are like, there's a lot more understanding and awareness of mental health, but we're still using these words that really denote mental illness. And that's really what we're going to try and do today, to break down, of course, one of the most common ones that people use quite a bit, which is anxiety.
Yeah, for sure. We'll delve into that. I have actually the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual
Oh,
5 in
okay.
front of me.
Okay.
So we'll definitely go into that. And I just want to double down on a little bit of what you were saying. That is, historically, mental illness was only seen as the people that were, and quote unquote, because it's a very not a word that we would use at this point in time, but were crazy. Individuals that their behavior was very influenced and was odd and very outside of the normal. And part of being able to destigmatize this was to recognize that, or get rid of the ideas of crazy, and come to a place of understanding mental illness as not that that the person has less value, or so forth.
Absolutely, and as we talk about that too, because as we're talking about what is mental illness, like the manual that you were using, well, it's used to describe and to really break down mental illness. A lot of it came about because of insurance companies. Was that not right?
Yeah, like even the reason why I needed to give a provisional diagnosis is because these diagnoses have codes. And because the internal process in Alberta Health Services meant the service tracking or statistics. Remember, it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. People forget the statistical part. The statistical part is about an understanding of tracking, an understanding of recognizing what is happening within the broader uh, um, society, not just within the individual. So these codes are taken and they're understood for population health.
Yeah, and
Yeah. So we needed to put a code in to indicate what's the reason this person is being treated at our clinic.
and like as I think about that, like yeah, as the statistics go up and down, that would also help them to determine, where best to put resources. Because if you have a statistical uptick of, like, let's say anxiety that we're going to talk about today, well, then that would help the Alberta government to go, okay, well, we need to pump a little bit more resources into there.
Yeah. Now, while you see that there is actually a far more mental illness in our world than there used to be, the numbers are going up, and they're going up actually dramatically. The large majority of those cases are actually not at the severe, chronic, persistent level. There is a difference between a chronic, persistent, severe mental illness. Then there is ones that are moderate. But everything seems to be lumped together as if it's all the same, as if it's all the same kind of mental illness. There's people out there on a day-to-day basis that have a variety of mood symptoms. They have a variety of anxiety symptoms. They have a variety of behavioral symptoms that come out, and they actually function pretty well within society. Not in the function that we would have seen that in the 70s and 80s. Only the people that were functioning very poorly would have been considered mentally ill.
And those are the people that historically that would have been treated with medication or even have been put institutionalized to some degree.
Yeah, and on a side note, and we'll get into anxiety in particular, we're serving individuals that have really severe mental illness not nearly as well as we used to. Like, there's ways in which it's gotten worse. There's ways in which it's gotten better. People having rights, people not being, having horrible ways in which there was abuses of power, are really great. But there are actually people that have very severe mental illness, and they're not served well by just being placed in the community. They need wraparound support. They could benefit from a more like institutional based programming in which there is actually a full surround support and a quality of life created. But even to say that word is a really bad and dirty word to say, institution.
Yeah, well, and like I think you've told me about this before, or one of your famous sayings that I have many Germanisms that route around in my head, like where if somebody is starving, like give them a sandwich before you treat their mental illness. Like you think about a lot of individuals that are maybe, part of a street population or that have a hard time working, and while giving them government funding, like AISH, for example, is a way to provide them with a sense of financial services. Not everybody has the cognitive capacity at the time to be able to administer that properly.
Absolutely. Like when the institutions really closed down, mostly in the 1970s, certainly in our history here in our part of the world,
Hmm.
what happened is the institutions got shut down. People were moved out into the communities, and the philosophy of that sounds wonderful in terms of being part of the community. That's a good thing. But the funding that would have gone to the institution didn't move to the community. It didn't go from we have an institution that has these millions of dollars to now we have the resources in the community. That funding didn't follow. Now we had a whole bunch of very mentally ill people that were homeless. Literally, that's what happened.
Yeah, actually, and maybe I'm deviating slightly. Do you remember Pinoca?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a hospital in Alberta.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there was actually like it wasn't just mentally ill people that they used to house in those facilities. It was also people with disabilities.
Yeah,
And what they found is with those individuals that have been institutionalized to such a great degree that when they did move them out into the community, and I'm speaking specifically about people with physical disabilities, is that actually they ended up passing away quite quickly once the facility closed down. And what they found is that after they brought these individuals back together, reestablished their community,
yeah,
their routine, and their homeostasis,
yeah,
that it brought them back up to
yeah.
mental and physical wellness.
Yeah, it's not just that the idea of an institution was bad, it was how the institutions were run.
Hmm.
And there's certainly examples in other parts of the world, like we always talk about Sweden, Norway, Denmark. When you talk about peoples with dementia, that they actually have facilities that both honor the person's ability um, to still have a sense of active participation in the world, and recognize the needs that they have. They do simple things that I don't know why we don't think of, like someone's going to wander away and not know where they're going. Well, if you have a tracking device on them, you can know where they are at any point in time.
Yeah.
And if they're lost, you can just go get them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's the least invasive thing to do.
Yeah. So we were talking about this obviously from a social work perspective, because we're talking about the broader society. We're talking about the history. We're talking about how society influences these things. Now let's delve into this. Like you had said, this gets into our like just common language. And someone says anxiety. Well, what do they actually mean by anxiety?
Yeah, because like as we were talking about this morning, like there's the broader definition, but then there's also a lot of subtypes of anxiety.
Well, that's just it. When someone says anxiety, someone says major depression, or they say depression, it means major depression. That's what it
Hmm.
means. And I think that individuals commonly understand that. They also think that when they say anxiety, that there's just some kind of anxiety is a general thing, but it's not.
No.
Um, so when you look at this from the diagnostic perspective, then let's take a look. So the anxiety disorders, so separation anxiety disorder, which clearly is more typical of youth and is speaking about a child that gets intensely dysregulated and anxious when their parent or caregiver attachment figure is separated from them.
Hmm.
We have selective mutism. Now, this is a very fascinating one.
Yeah, tell me about it.
I've seen a couple people that have had this, and I think Big Bang Theory made this really, more, known.
Yeah, popularized.
Mhm.
Raj basically, whenever he would be around Penny or other women, he would not be able to speak.
For sure, for sure. And it's like there's certain circumstances in which there's like just an inability to be able to speak. It's a real It's a real thing. It's a real condition. Social phobia
Hmm.
or social anxiety disorder, as people would often call it, and we recognize that each one of these is about a particular type of fear-based response, but it is within a specific realm. So
Mm.
when we're looking at like a social phobia, we're looking at not just someone feeling like, you know what, I'm really nervous and I don't know what to say. I'm concerned that I'm going to sound stupid. Those things are true, but it's deeper than that. It's I'm going to look like I'm afraid and I'm feeling anxious, and people are going to see that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's almost like that fear of being up on stage, and where we get sort of that inner mind where you're thinking that people are going to laugh at you, people are going to look at you. Or I would even say, did you ever well, you've watched the Spider-Verse movie, right? Do you remember that one scene where Miles is going through the hallways and he's thinking that everybody's looking at him because his powers are coming out? I would say that that's kind of an example of social anxiety there.
Yeah, for sure. And then the next level to it is the people are going to see that I'm anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want them to see that I'm anxious. They're going to see that when I talk, that my voice, they're going to hear my voice quavering. They're going to see my cheek twitching. They're going to see my legs shaking. And like people think of it as just the idea that someone is viewing them and
Mm-hmm.
judging them, but it's actually another level than that. It's that they're going to see that I'm anxious, and I don't want them to see that I'm anxious. I'm going to seem weak. I'm going to seem like a loser because they can see that I'm anxious and I shouldn't be anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. So then I can imagine with that, then basically they just don't go out at all because they're just going to avoid the entire situation.
Now, interesting. So, as we're looking at that, that actually leads into another type of anxiety potentially,
Mm.
and the one that you're referring to is agoraphobia.
Mm-hmm.
It's this notion that I'm very afraid of open spaces, but also of things like subways, buses, places like that, uh, for sure. Um, and then there is panic disorder, which is fascinating. Simply because someone has had a panic attack does not mean they have panic disorder.
Mm.
Um, Panic disorder is something that it comes out of the blue. So it's like the individual that has a panic attack because they are super overwhelmed with life.
Mm.
That's not panic disorder. Panic disorder is I'm sitting here and nothing's happening,
Mm.
and then all of a sudden, boom! I have a panic attack.
Mm. Yeah, so there's no environmental stimuli whatsoever. It's basically that I would almost say it's like their autonomic nervous system just is um like it's almost lost its programming.
So it's super fascinating because the thing that pushes the panic attack is that they're concerned that there's gonna be a panic attack.
Oh, yeah,
Get afraid. They're just like, I have no idea why this happens. It just comes out of the blue.
so
And so then they have this heightened position, and it makes it more likely for panic attacks to happen.
right, so would almost be like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. It's very, very fascinating. So when you look at panic attacks, what I would say to people is there's two reasons why someone would have a panic attack. One of them is because there is some kind of trigger, something that we can recognize, something we can understand, like an individual that is very afraid of germs, and then they're forced to go into the hospital because of um, some kind of issue that they've got, and they're
Mhm.
terrified of the hospital because there's germs all over the place there, and they have a panic attack. Well, we know why they had a panic attack. That just makes sense. We also have people that they're just like, you know, out walking in the park, everything's good, and then boom, they have a panic attack.
Yeah. Now, like as we're talking about this, because there was a diagnosis in the DSM that has now been taken out, and I just want to clarify this. It was called conversion
Oh,
disorder. That now we know it as functional neurological disorder. That this is not the same as that,
right.
because FND or functional neurological disorder has a biological basis.
Yeah. Like that's an entirely different category of within the diagnostic manual.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to clarify that so
Mhm.
that if there's anybody out there that is listening that has friends or family members that have FND, that we are not talking about that.
Yeah, for sure. Like those look like a specific neurological condition like blindness or paralysis, or seizures. And the when you do the testing neurologically, nothing is that the neurological part isn't actually the cause. It's a different cause for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, interesting. There's some overlap when we talk about panic disorder, in terms of not the neurological part, but in terms of recognizing that there's actually biological um, processes that are involved here. What the way I would say it is that there's a sensitized alarm system.
Yeah.
So like there still is something that's happened in the panic attack, and often that could be something that is not perceived by the person. It's a flutter of the heart. It's a
Mm.
change in physical temperature. It's something that they haven't perceived, but their body, not their cognition, their other part of their mind has perceived a threat.
Mm.
And then what happens is the alarm goes off, and then their thought processes jump to what is wrong. The thought processes go, something's wrong, what's wrong, something's wrong. And then we have the explosion of the panic attack. There's an automatic thought inside them once their heart flutters that, oh, something is wrong. It's not even, I'm having a heart attack. It's there's been a perceived danger.
Yeah, yeah. So right there, like when you talk about that, like I almost think of like their amygdala is just hyper attuned, and they just don't know how to deal with that. That's where, in some cases, when I'm treating mild anxiety or even something with anger, we always look at, okay, think about everything going back, like building that up so that you can recognize what is your early warning system so that you can stop that.
Yeah. So for this, often what I would say to people is I would say, how many times has the fire alarm gone off?
Mm.
You know, and how many times have you actually seen a real fire? Like it's minuscule, the number of times that the fire alarm goes off versus how many times there's an actual fire. But whenever the fire alarm goes off, do we just ignore it?
No, yeah, yeah, and see right there, right there, I think that that's a key thing, because what you're really talking about this from a cognitive behavioral perspective,
Mhm.
and I think that for a lot of us, well, for a lot of people, when they think about CBT, it's like, oh, we're just going to ignore those thoughts because those thoughts aren't real. But it's like, let's look at the kernel of truth there
Mhm.
and let's reattribute that.
Yeah, let's actually take a moment to go, is there actually a threat? Let's do a threat analysis. Let's actually listen to this for a second and go, is there actually a threat? The other thing we don't do is we don't go, well, the stupid alarm system, it keeps going off. I'm just going to rip it out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Because then you become a daredevil, and not the fun kind, not the comic book character.
Yeah, totally. It's like, no, this alarm system actually is very important. It's there for a reason. It is there to warn us if something is wrong. And so we don't rip out the alarm system. We don't take the smoke detector and unplug it. At least it's not a good idea to do that.
It almost sounds it's like we're tuning a piano.
And so the interesting thing with this one in particular, with a panic disorder, is being able to first tease out, is there something going on? Are the panic attacks happening because more of an idea of like an allostatic load? I am under so much stress. I am so distressed.
Mm-hmm.
Or I've got something that I have to feel like I have to face, and I can't find that there's any way around it, and I'm absolutely terrified of facing it. At least then teasing it apart to know, what are we dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some common things with panic attacks that can be helpful. But when we've teased it apart, and we can recognize, oh, okay, this is a panic disorder type of experience, then we can start to at least lean into the areas that are going to be more helpful, trying to appropriately attune that alarm system, and through both body-based processes and also through cognitive processes.
Right. I think we may have forgotten to mention something, because with a lot of this, like as we're going through, for it to be diagnostic, these need to be present for, what is it, 6 weeks or more.
Oh yeah. So each one of the diagnostic criteria will have like a different timeline. And you're right. I actually didn't look at the timeline for the panic disorder. The DSM works kind of like when you go to like an Asian restaurant and you're like, okay, we're getting a group meal here, right? And we have so many from column A, so many from column B, and there's no substitution. Like they need to actually fit criteria A, criteria B, criteria C, um, and then we go, how rigid do we become in that? So one of the things is a time indicator that is relative to this. So like for depression, it's 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's just one that I know just off the top of my head. But you make a very important point. I want to also double down on another point that's really essential when you're talking about this, and that is all of these diagnoses have a realm of normal. It's normal to feel nervous. It's normal to, when you're going to go into a new social situation, it's normal for you to have thoughts about how am I going to be perceived. These things become, people think that, oh, I have this diagnosis because I am nervous when I go out. No, that's normal.
Yeah.
Like this has to be debilitating. It has to cause a certain level of effect on your ability in terms of relationships, in terms of work ability, or other important parts of our function in life. Like I am a person that drives away from the house and goes, I didn't close the garage door, and sometimes I have to go back.
Yeah.
Because I can't shake it.
Yeah.
But I don't go back 5 times.
Yeah. Because then you would have OCD, and
Right.
then you would be, coming to me for exposure therapy.
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes do I go and I check the locks around the house because I go, I don't think that they got locked. Yeah. Do I spend 2 hours continually checking? No.
Yeah. Or, or even fear of snakes. Like a general like uneasiness around snakes is absolutely fine, because on an evolutionary basis, having a fear of snakes kept us alive. But, if you literally can't leave the house because you're worried about the garter snake that's out there, or that may be out there, then that comes down to treatment.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. And so moving on to the next part, because we're still not done. Like if you look at anxiety, and there's lots of actually anxiety disorders. So generalized anxiety disorder. Now, this is the one that people go, oh, well, this is anxiety. When we're talking about anxiety, all those other ones are like different kind of things, but we're talking about generalized anxiety. But not necessarily.
No.
That the name of it makes it sound like that would be the one.
Yeah, it sounds like the umbrella term. It's kind of like there's generalized anxiety, and then all these other things fit underneath.
Yeah, and that's not actually it. Generalized anxiety is excessive anxiety and worry. So this is where I worry about many, many different things. And I worry and I worry and I worry and I worry and I worry. Generalized anxiety is the worrying disorder.
So yeah, like I almost wonder, like, why wouldn't they just call it non-specific anxiety?
Yeah. And it's a good question, because in the general population, when we talk about anxiety, most of the time we're actually talking about nervousness. We're not talking about anxiety.
Or stressed.
Yeah. We're talking about either being nervous or being stressed. We use the word anxiety, which is a clinical term. And yeah, we're really talking about being stressed. We're talking about maybe body responses. But we're not actually talking about these particular conditions.
Yeah, this is why emotional granularity is really important. Because the more that you can boil that down, the more that you can understand, hey, this clinical term doesn't fit for me.
Yeah, yeah. And people, like, fundamentally, many people would benefit from therapy. Many people, in terms of working through symptoms they're experiencing, in terms of working through difficulties in their life, learning a greater um, ability for resilience, but also working through character flaws. People often don't think about, I should go to therapy and work through character flaws. It's actually useful,
Yeah.
important. Um, but many times, where it comes back to is these subclinical things where people would tremendously live a better life. They don't need a diagnosis for these things. We use the language, the diagnosis actually gets watered down because it's not actually causing that severe of an ability in their life. And yet they would definitely benefit from better emotional balance, better ability to regulate themselves.
Yeah. So really, I'm curious, Jeremy. So with you, would you say that if we treat our character flaws go untreated, then given the right circumstances, then it's almost like cracks in concrete where they could widen, and then that could go into a
Yeah.
diagnosis.
The area that often we would kind of talk more about flaws of character, it also kind of becomes, when we're talking about it at a treatment level, it also becomes very pathologized, because then we're like, oh, you're talking about personality disorders. It's like, no, you don't need to have a personality disorder to have areas of life that you really could work on and be more healthy in terms of how you relate to yourself and others.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is one. You mentioned it, but I kind of flipped past it.
Oh.
And that is specific phobias. So you talked about snakes.
Yeah, yeah. Because actually, one thing that I actually really enjoy, because one thing that I do help people with, lately is phobias. And honestly, I find that, well, for me as a clinician, I find that very gratifying to go through and to help people with that specifically. Like, I don't know the diagnostic language behind that, but a lot of that comes down to, like, they've had specific experiences, a lot of them when they're younger, and then it's just about the association with that and learning, helping the amygdala to kind of calm down through gradual exposure with that, and helping them to learn self-soothing techniques.
Yeah, for sure. Like, there's some very interesting, because you could have a phobia about almost anything.
Doorknobs.
Yeah. Huh. That would be, I think, a pretty hard phobia to live with, because you're just constantly faced with doorknobs.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends upon what kind of doorknob you're talking about.
Trent. Wait. Are are you saying that you have a phobia of certain people that have certain characteristics? Or are you talking about a phobia of, like, door handles?
I don't know, Jeremy. What does that sound like to you?
Because maybe we walk around and we're faced with doorknobs all the time, no matter where we go. I mean,
Yeah. I have a phobia of idiots. No, I don't. No, I don't. And I'm just being facetious.
Yeah, for sure, of course.
Yeah. So we only got partway through. Are there other anxiety issues?
Yeah, so actually that covers them. If I was to just pop over here in the front of the book where it just has the codes, then it's easy to kind of pop through them. So there's separation anxiety, selective mutism, specific phobia, and then that breaks down into, you specify if it's an animal, if it's a natural environment. Interestingly enough, they specifically indicate blood injection injury, fear of blood injections and transfusions. So there's some specific subcategories, and then there's other. And after specific phobias, there's social anxiety or social phobia, panic disorder, agoraphobia, and generalized anxiety. Then the very last ones, there's a catch-all, and that is anxiety due to another medical condition
Mm.
and other other specified anxiety disorder or unspecified anxiety disorder. There's always a catch-all somewhere that is like there's some things that don't fit into all the categories, and so they place like a catch-all kind of
Yeah. And
process.
one thing again, another thing that I've learned from you, and I think that this would be important to highlight, because sometimes some people say, I need a diagnosis, but it's about asking yourself, what utility, what does this diagnosis serve in your life?
Yeah. So like for some people to be able to, they name it to tame it. So they're like, okay, I understand what it is I'm experiencing. Um, and so it could be helpful, and it also could be harmful because the person then sees themselves all through the lens of the disorder, which would be problematic. Uh, one of the things that I think is very important in talking about these diagnoses is we talk about all of this all together, because we'll probably have other conversations where we delve into some of the other disorders, but is to recognize these are descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
They're not causes.
Mm-hmm.
Like this book doesn't speak to causes. It just speaks to descriptions of what it is that's happening for someone.
Yeah, well, and like yeah, so it looks at symptoms. Like you don't look in the DSM and go, "Oh, I know how to treat this," or "I know where this is coming from." And I think it's also important too that we as clinicians, we can give people that well, those of us that can diagnose, depending upon how you look at things, different characteristics can lead to different diagnoses.
Yeah, for sure. Like this book has very poor inter-rater reliability. What I mean by that is you see 6 people that use the same book and you'll get 3 different diagnoses. Um, and what's the reason? The reason is because mental health is complex. It's not simple. And it's also because the symptoms overlap so much.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that hard for someone potentially to get an anxiety diagnosis, like say a generalized anxiety, and someone missed PTSD, or they're like, oh, you have a panic disorder, but they missed PTSD.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm wondering if because as you were talking about that, yeah, PTSD kept rattling around in my brain. I'm wondering for the next time we do one of these diagnoses explained, if we maybe go through PTSD, because I think that's another one that tends to be entering into the common vernacular.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Absolutely. The other thing that I don't think is helpful is when someone gets like 5 or 6. They're like, "Oh, you meet the criteria for depression. You meet the criteria for. You meet the criteria for. You meet the criteria for." I'm like, well, like they might meet the criteria for all of those things, but that does not actually give a good way of someone understanding how to move forward. There are some things that, when you look at the diagnosis, they give us some clues. For example, teasing out the difference between panic disorder and when someone's having panic attacks and it's not panic disorder gives us a clue. It
Mm-hmm.
gives us some information and guidance. Gives common language for people to be able to talk with each other about things that someone's experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not without any use. Just kind of recognizing it as a particular framework, rather than like the Bible. This is
Mm-hmm.
the Bible.
Well, yeah, but I mean, yeah. Well, and like any Bible, it requires exegesis. It requires conversation, understanding, because it's not like clear. It's kind of written like stereo instructions.
You said exegesis?
No, exegesis.
That
So
makes way more sense. You said Bible, and then it sounded like you said something about Jesus.
no,
And I
no,
was like,
no,
and
no,
I
no,
was like,
no.
like, I don't understand.
Exegesis. Because way back in the day, I did a lot of religious studies classes, and where we actually learned the different ways of actually interpreting things through like different parables. Like you could do literal, you could do look at things in terms of like what they may represent at the time, and it all comes down to context. And I think the same thing can be said for the DSM.
Yeah, totally. Keep in mind, this is a working book.
Oh,
That
yeah.
is to say, it's being revised, it's being revised, it's being revised. The way that we understand our mental health is as much socially created as it is biologically created.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. Or for those of you that are interested to actually go back through and to look at a lot of the diagnoses that were at one time put in there, but then taken out.
Yeah.
Or, like
Or
one,
reorganized in their understanding.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the most famous ones would be, like right now would be autism.
Sure, reorganized in its understanding, absolutely.
Yeah.
In the most recent changes, you mentioned conversion disorder, which is now functional neurological disorder, which has
hmm
been organized in its understanding.
Yeah, well, and there again too, even though these are reorganized, and there's new additions, that's not even the newest edition of the
Yeah.
DSM. Depending upon the clinician that you do go to, they may still ascribe to certain older perspectives.
Like this is DSM-5. There is DSM-5 text revision.
Yeah.
So my familiarity has been from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 4 through text revision through 5, and there's some parts of the text revision for 5 that I'm not as familiar with.
Yeah, and to be honest, like I have a passing familiarity with the DSM, but it's nowhere in depth as you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm curious, man. As we've gone through this conversation, what's really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the big takeaways for me is that we have a much more kind of balanced perspective on understanding where diagnosis fits, and that it's like part of uh, an understanding with limitations, like that it's not somehow the end all be all of this is what is wrong, and that our common understanding in society certainly is not I think accurate in terms of what the actual diagnostic manual, how it's organized and what the diagnosis means. There's been a great, as I would say, watering down of mental illness from something that was massively debilitating, being the only thing that was considered mental illness, to something that that people have a lot of within the realm of the human experience being pathologized.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that because like I think now, and I've said that to people before, like where they're like, "Oh, I'm experiencing anxiety," and like just asking them, "Well, what does that mean to you? Are you experiencing anxiety? Are you feeling anxious? Or are you feeling stressed?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about for you? What are your takeaways?
Really one of the big ones that you pointed out, like that I hadn't thought of in a long time, was panic disorder versus a panic attack. Because I think for so many of us, like we, I think everybody's experienced, or a lot of us have experienced a panic attack. But it's like, when that doesn't happen, what does that mean, and how can we tease that apart? Because I think that that would indicate, oh, maybe we need to dig into that further. Yeah. But on that note, I'm Trent Akers.
And I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that this message has been as meaningful to you as it has been to us. If you're looking for help, you can find us on Facebook at Humanizing Mental Health.